Hi everybody, welcome to Popcorn Therapy, where the stories we love tell us something about who we are. The story that we are working with today is Lindy West's adult braces and the conversation around adult braces and the truths or maybe fictions that came out through that memoir, and also, you know, the conversation around it, the publicity around it, the branding around it, all of that stuff. There is a part one to this conversation, so we're going to be jumping right into it. The conversation today is with Tanille Geib, who is an intimacy coach, among other things, a really wonderful human being who had a lot of interesting insights and thoughts about this conversation as well. So if you haven't yet heard part one, feel free to go back and listen to it. I don't know that you need to listen to them in order, but it's the order we had the conversation. So feel free to listen back to part one and then come back here to part two to listen to the rest of my conversation around adult braces by Lindy West with the lovely, wonderful Tanille Geib. Thanks for listening and enjoy this conversation. Another piece that I wanted to talk about is how I came across this whole story was that I read a piece on Substack. I'm pretty sure the first one I read was called I Escaped from Bluebeard's Castle, Lindy West Did Not. And I was like, ooh, like, say more. Because I do a lot of like mythology, folklore, narrative. Narrative is a big piece that comes up for me in therapy, like the stories we tell about ourselves, you know, the stories that resonate about us, even stories like I'm not enough or I'm ugly or whatever. Like those are stories that can be really powerful in our heads, right? So Bluebeard's Castle, for those that don't know, is basically a story about a woman who gets married to this man who's like rich and handsome and all these things. And he has this secret room in his basement and he goes away for a while. She's got a key. He gives her a key and he says, don't open this one door. You can do anything you want, but don't open this one door. What does she do? She opens the door and it's all the dismembered pieces of his ex-wives that he has murdered.
Whoa, fuck.
And so it's a bit of a test that if she trusts him and doesn't open the door, he won't kill her. But if he finds out that she's opened the door, then she's fair game in that sense. So there's this story. There are a couple of other folklore stories like that, that are basically stories of abusive relationships, right? And I think what's interesting about this is what happens next in this story. How does she escape? What does she do? Who does she tell? How does she tell somebody? Like, how does she escape from this experience, right? Yeah. And so there were quite a few of these pieces, not just this one about Bluebeard's Castle, but a few others that I read, which were women who had been in abusive relationships recognizing themselves in Lindy's story. So as they were reading this book, they were seeing abusive dynamics that they were able to escape from and seeing Lindy with Stockholm syndrome or trauma bonding, you know, and, you know, we'll talk about codependency and so on, but these aspects of like convincing myself that this is okay, like having this feeling that I can't leave because I can't survive being alone and so on. And, you know, I do know that a lot of the time in abusive dynamics, there's often a lot of like putting someone down, doubting someone's, you know, self, all of these things. And so often the abused person, and sometimes the abuse goes both ways, but often the abused person will have a real lack of a sense of self, which is something that Lindy talks about. Is it clear that that's from a hum or from someone else in her life or from the trolls? Like, we don't know where that comes from, if that's what it is. But I did think it was really interesting that there were so many people who were relating on this particular level.
Oof. Yeah. I mean, being a survivor of abuse in a couple of relationships, I wasn't having those like big realization moments because I think like, and again, it's not like she was sharing that like Aham was putting her down, like Aham was trying to build her up like a lot of the times. And again, we don't know, like, but that's the story she's sharing, is that like he does say she's beautiful and that she loves her and all of these things, but her lack of self sturdiness or love that she has for self definitely impacts the power dynamic of continuing in a relationship that might not be good for her at times. So that would be my lens of it, is that we don't actually, and again, it's not to say that it's not happening, it's just we don't, like, she's not recounting.
That's not the story that we get.
That's not the story that we get.
Yeah, and I mean, I think you can see, you know, Aham clearly cheated on her, like, in a couple of different ways. Like, he maybe, you know, withheld some truths or whatever it is, but I think you're right that the way that she talks about him is that he's quite loving and quite encouraging and, you know, all of those things.
Yeah.
Yeah, and, you know, one piece of the power dynamic that isn't in the book, so, you know, I don't know if you've been aware of this piece, but at this point, from what I understand, the three of them are living on Lindy's property, and Lindy is the only one who is really making money. The other two have some gigs here and there, I think. It's not totally clear. Like, I don't know that anyone knows how much income is coming into that household, who's getting it from where. So I could be wrong in this, but my understanding is that she's the breadwinner. And she has said in an interview, like, we need this book to do well because she's supporting Aham, Roya, and also Aham's kids from a previous marriage. So she has a lot of people to support. So here's a feeling I had. Again, could be totally wrong.
Yeah.
But there were so many moments in the book where I felt like Lindy was trying to say, I'm not okay, in subtext, right? Yeah. This is a little bit from my English literature, having studied English literature, you know, like looking through the text, the context, you know, what's actually being said here underneath what the explicit narrative. And there are so many of those moments where it does feel like not only her naming, doubting herself, having these moments of like, maybe this relationship isn't right for me, maybe I'm better off on my own, I feel so much safer and better with my intimate friends. Like, there's just a lot of these moments. And so some people had said, you know, some of this feels like Aham's looking over her shoulder, making sure she writes it down in the correct way, in a way that makes him look good, right? So again, don't know. I'm not saying that this is what was happening. No, but as you say, you know, this is a piece of writing that it feels like someone's diary, but it's not. It's something, it's a narrative that is created for public consumption, for entertainment, and for money to be made, right?
And very curated. Like, those, all of those people, and Roya, I'm sure, had, like, to have a final stamp of what is shared and what isn't. And, like, yeah, so it's not going to be the full story. We don't know the full story.
Yeah. And, you know, some people have said, like, this is intentionally creating controversy to make more money on the book. Like, maybe there's not as much drama as we're seeing here.
Right.
It's just that they were really wanting to, like, drum up, you know, more attention on the book, which is possible, but I'm not 100% sure that translates to dollars. I think especially right now in this attention economy, like, people have probably been spending more time reading those think pieces and, you know, clicking on Instagram links about it than actually purchasing the book and reading it. 100%. So I'm not sure if that was the strategy, how well it worked, or if that would have been the strategy, right? But, you know, there was a moment that I think I felt really uncomfortable with, which was when Lindy was describing being in a very, very depressed time in her life. Yes. Which she described as panicked but tired. I think she said it something like that, where I was like, ooh, that's like such a good description of what that feels like.
Like, if you're just panicked, but you have no energy to do anything about the panic.
Yeah. Relatable. And I mean, let me say, if I hadn't said it before, she's a funny, insightful writer. She had some great lines in there. Yeah. Another one that really stood out to me, it was something like, lust is too close to hunger and I'm not allowed to be hungry.
Oh, that's such a good line.
Ooh, that will stick with me. Like, she's a good writer, okay? Like,
she's a great
There's
writer.
A lot of good, I'm not criticizing really. No. Lindy. I think maybe there's some, did wonder about the editor, right? Kind of like, I wonder how many times someone asked her, are you sure you want to tell this part of the story? Are you sure? You know, like, I don't know. No, I don't know who would have necessarily done that perfectly, but anyway. Okay, so Lindy is in this this deep depression, and she's having trouble, like, getting things done around the house. And so Aham suggests that they enter into a dom-sub kink relationship, in which, again, I'm paraphrasing, but it was something like, now I'm getting kisses for things I would have been resentful for doing before. This may open a whole other conversation about kink and how that works. And, you know, this is about power dynamics in part as well. But I felt really uncomfortable with that. And she has a moment, too, at the end where she says, that there's a moment when, people who care for wildlife that have, been injured or something like that, when the wildlife starts biting them, they take that as a good sign that the animal is ready to be released back out into the wild because their instincts are coming back online. And she says that in relationship to her saying, I no longer want to do this dom sub thing where I'm doing your chores for you because I'm your sub or something like that. I'm not sure exactly, they didn't completely explain that whole situation. But that was another one of those moments where it was just like, Lindy, blink if you're okay. Like, this seems like, not a great situation to be in. And, in the same way that I guess I felt like if you were reading this book thinking this is the example of polyamory, it's not a good place to go for that, I don't think.
Definitely not. Please don't.
Yeah, and same with this kind of dom sub kink thing. Like, I'm not sure that's really how that's supposed to work. Is like a way of manipulating someone into doing their laundry or something like that.
I have a different take
thoughts.
On that.
Tell me, give me your different take.
Yeah,
please.
so I wish maybe if it was the connection that I made in my brain was like she talked about her ADHD stuff, but never related it to this kink stuff, which I put in my head as a relation. So yeah, if you are severely depressed and because she did say like, oh, like it was to like help me take care of myself, which was like drink water, go for a walk. Like, I think what I read was she was panicked and depressed, and she has ADHD, which is executive function issues at times, right? And but she did talk about her ADHD and what that meant for her life and her career, and even related it later to Roya, who could like pay a bill when it arrived the day of, right? So if I was going to look at the lens of executive function issues while also depressed, and the fact that it only lasted a little bit of time, that it wasn't like a forever dynamic. And again, we don't know what happened in that dynamic, but what I was assuming from that, or maybe my lens, came with like, oh, like he thought a reward system could maybe beneficial, and like he was doing executive function, like management and mental load for her so that she could take care of herself better. But maybe I'm just too like rose-colored glasses and too like thinking that people are doing the best that they can for each other. And what I thought about that was like, that specific section was like, yeah, she really needed a lot of help. And if you are low in dopamine and are not medicated, like she didn't get the diagnosis she wanted, it is so hard to function day to day. So if someone's going to take the mental load off of you and reward you, you get dopamine hits, So that's my layer that I went through with it, was like, it was like a loving care thing that she needed to move through depression, and because there wasn't strictness on when it ended or it needed to be forever, and she was sub for his like his needs in his life, because I didn't get that tone from it, but I thought that could have been a really nice gift for their relationship, to have a clarity or direction or agreement that could work for both of them for a time. So yeah, I don't know. What do you think about the ADHD executive function lens on that dynamic?
Well, I do love the rose-colored glasses that you have on, care and rewards. A reward sort of strategy can work for some people with ADHD, dopamine and so on, but framing it as a kink, I'm not sure about that, because so my understanding of specifically the dom sub dynamic is often that it's actually about power. It's about an expression of power that can be healing, right? It can be a healing way of saying, here's how I'm going to be in charge. And often in that scenario, it's the submissive partner who is actually the one with the power, because they're the one that can say, no, or stop, or that's enough, or, here's what I need, or whatever it is. And the dom is actually serving the sub. And that's, the lens that I learned about that was via trauma, which is what I was studying, is sort of like, if I've had experiences of not being in control of my body or my sexuality, for some people, framing it within this power dynamic that is explicit, where they can make choices within that power dynamic, that can be a really positive and healing thing.
Definitely.
But that's not what this felt like to me. This felt like, and again, I was reading it as she was doing things for him. And now that you say that, I realize that wasn't explicit. I don't think she ever said.
I don't think so. And I could be wrong. I don't have a great memory, and I have ADHD, so sometimes it's really hard for me to process words. But I am medicated, so I could digest them a bit more. But yeah, I guess I didn't get the sense that like they started this agreement where, because like she was depressed and she started doing things for him to like feel validated and alive. Like I felt like it was a care plan, or again, I don't know, but it felt like a care plan for her to be held in so that she could get to a healthier place in her depression. And when she felt like she was there, then that dissolved that dynamic, and she did have choice whether it was there or not. Like it didn't, but again, I don't know, it was edited, it was like produced, and I mean, I may have the whatever the opposite of rose-colored glasses are, but Sure.
and so there's a little bit of this expectation or this fear that he's taking advantage of her. I think also because, like I said, I had read this Bluebeard's Castle piece before I read the book. So I already had a bit of a lens of like, is this abusive? What is he doing? Like, how is he taking advantage of her? So I may have been reading it with a different expectation. And I think you are correct that it's not explicit that she's doing things for him. And she did mention things like taking care of herself. So I feel like it's fair to read it the way that you did.
Yeah, and like there can be a whole conversation around kink, but there are people that are service bottoms and service tops, and like, you know, dom sub dynamics can be for anyone's benefit, and it's about the agreement around who it is and the consent around it. And like, you know, I remember being part of not a 24/7 dynamic ever, but a dynamic where it was like we had put in place like if we are hanging out, you know, I would remind someone to stretch, because that was one of their life goals, is they wanted to become more flexible. So one of our agreements was like, I would remind them to care for themselves while we watch TV. Like that sounds nice, but
That's very sweet. Yeah.
you know, but like it did have that tone or that agreement of like, like a power exchange in some way, but it wasn't like, you know, I was a sub in that dynamic, right? Like I wasn't doing anything for that person. I was just like reminding them, hey, this is a life goal you have. Do you want to do that during this time we're together? Right. Like it's, you know, so
I guess the consent piece too, like
exactly
with Lindy as depressed as she said she was. And I mean, I didn't get the sense they were doing anything like physically dangerous for her or anything like that. Like I don't think it was that at all. No. But I do think that, the consent piece is maybe the key there with kink.
100%.
And you know, so much of what we're talking about here. And I love, actually, you mentioned the word self-consent in talking about like those check-ins with yourself in a relationship and so on. And self-consent is, we may have different frames for it, but it's a practice that I work on with my clients all the time, because I think so much of the time we do think a lot, you know, if we're mindful and care about other people, we think about their consent, but we don't always consider our own, right? And when I'm working on it with clients, it's not even necessarily sexually, though it can be, but it's like, am I consenting to eating this salad I feel like I'm supposed to eat? You know, am I consenting to going to this party when I'm overexhausted? Like, am I consenting to, you know, doing a 5K run today on the first day of my period or whatever it is? It's like, is my body actually on board with the things that I'm doing, right? Because we have so much, we get told so much of the time what we should be doing, what we're doing wrong, like all of these things. And self-consent, I think, is a radical practice in so many different kinds of ways, and applying it within relationship is so key. So consent is a big piece here, and I'm not sure how much. Like, again, maybe I think that's a nice frame of, you know, this was a care plan for Lindy, and that's what it meant at the time, because she couldn't be fully consenting to a lot of these things. But I guess thinking of it as a dom sub, you know, kink relationship when she wasn't in a full place to be able to consent to that feels uncomfortable for me. And again, we don't know. Was sex even involved in this?
We don't know.
She only mentions kisses, but...
I mean... Yeah, but like I know it can be a tool. Like again, I was coming into it like, oh, she has executive function issues, and like even just think of a regular person who like has to make three decisions a day just for what food we're putting in our bodies or that we're supposed to eat times a day. Like that is living hell for
Right.
ADHD people. And I also think that, you know, again, like it was such a short
Yeah.
part. Like she didn't really expand. So again, it's like people that have fear or people that have been harmed in power dynamics or even in kink dynamics, whatever, right? Like we can't even tell like what were the agreements, what were the like pieces of that for her.
Yeah,
And
I think it is interesting what is expanded on, because there are some things that are really expanded on, and then some things that are just absolutely skated over. And one of those things, maybe the dom sub kink, you know, it's polyamory, and codependency is another one. She uses that word a lot. And it feels a little bit like that kind of therapy speak thing where you're just sort of using words that you picked up in therapy, but, you know, what does that actually mean to you? I'm curious if you use a codependency framework with your clients. Like, is that a word that you use?
I think if I look at it in the past year, I've used that word with only two couples clients. And I work with quite a bit of people. I think it's like, yeah, I don't overuse it. But at some times when I see that people are over giving with the assumption of what that person wants, and then it's not, and then both people are just like massively over giving the things that they can't even do. So the self-consent issue is there, and then they're over giving, and it's not even the giving of the thing that the person actually needs or wants. It can become this like codependent, murky, sticky place to kind of be in relationship, right? And so, yeah, I sometimes use it, but not often. I look at power dynamics, I look at culture, I look at, you know, people's wounds and traumas. I look at like, do they have like a full like life, whatever that means to them? Like if you're introverted, that's gonna be different from an extrovert, right? Like I look at like is there a self-consent practice? Like I usually talk a lot about consent, not even just from sex, obviously. It's just like a daily practice in relationships and self. But I can see sometimes using it when there's such stickiness that they don't know who they are without that person or that dynamic happening.
Yeah, so I don't really use that phrasing that often. And, you know, like you, I feel like there are just other frames that I find are more useful. And I will just talk about codependency a little bit, and why I don't like to use it that much. It originated as a term. It actually originated as co-alcoholic was the first way that people used that word. So it was about people in partnerships with alcoholics specifically. And then it evolved to people who are in relationships with people who had any kind of addiction. And I think from that rooting, it's this idea of like, you're enabling, you are part of the problem, like you are a part, it's like it's sort of victimizing or victim blaming somebody for that relationship. And I have lots to say about addiction. I'll put that over to the side over there just for a moment.
Sure.
But it's kind of like the phrasing has evolved. And I think that, you know, if it's a useful framing for you, that's great. I think for Lindy, obviously it is a useful framing, and it speaks to things like overgiving, like you said, sort of losing a sense of identity in order to like please someone else, and a terror of being alone, like a real terror of being alone, which she speaks to many times, and, you know, has phrasings like, am I inserting myself into a Ham's polyamory because I'm terrified of being alone? I don't know. I'm not going to answer that question. Moving right along. You're like, whoa, okay.
I'm like, no, but
like,
that's probably
maybe we should sit with that one for a second. So, you know, I find that the way that I like to talk about those things is more from the perspective of like attachment theory. I find more helpful in terms of that. Like if you have insecure attachment, and I have my problems with attachment theory too, but I think that, you know, that means that you let's say your needs were not met or only sometimes met when you were a child, and so you learned to to predict what other people are thinking or feeling, especially in abusive childhood situations. You're losing your authenticity so that you can maintain connection with someone who's unpredictable, which means you're so over-focused on what that person needs and feels and wants, and then you anticipate those needs, and you absolutely forget about yourself in the process. Like, from a trauma perspective, every child will trade authenticity for connection, because connection is survival from a deeply primal human perspective, right? And so, if there was any of that, whether, insecure attachment, or, which I think she has a moment of talking about that and it really resonated with her, or trauma specifically, like these are things where your nervous system is going to guide you to self-abandon in order to stay in relationship over and over and over again. That's not your fault. That's what your body is doing because of what's happened to you. Okay. And, some of that may also be family system stuff. Like, Lindy talks about her family, but, who else is overgiving in your family? Who else has lost their identity in order to maintain relationship? What was that like for them? What did that mean for them? Was there abuse, in relationships in the family system? Like, those would be questions I might be asking if Lindy were my client, which she is not. So I think that, I think it would have been interesting to break down some of that stuff, like where some of these pieces come from. And for all we know, I mean, it's the trauma of having been in the public eye in the way that we talked about, and having been so deeply criticized in that sense, having these feelings that so many people have told her. Well, actually, one of the narratives that she names is that, people who saw the video of the throuple that they put out a few years ago, people kept saying, there's no way this man wants to be with Lindy because she is fat. He wants to be with the thin woman, and they're only with Lindy because of some other reason, right? That's certainly not how I would frame that narrative. I would think of it more so as like, Lindy, you don't have to do this. Like, Lindy, you could leave this relationship and you are very attractive, and many people would be attracted to you, and you could have many like satisfying sexual experiences with people who are monogamous or monogamish or whatever it is that you want, right? Like, you could do that. Like, I don't think she knows how awesome she is, in a lot of ways. So I want to be clear that I don't think that's what's happening, but I feel like the trauma, wherever that comes from, is informing more so that tendency to self-abandon, right? Which a lot of us have. Again, relatable. I'm not saying I don't do this or haven't done this.
Relatable. Yeah. Totally. Well, and I just want to like come with like the most, like, there's so much critique going on for these three humans that like, let's just like take a moment. Like, yes, it was messy. Yes, there was boundaries broken. There may have been coercion and duress at times. Like, that could all still live there. But say if we actually believe the women of this story, that they are choosing this consensually and are into it, then like for them as a throuple to go on that interview and be so brave, and then all you get is like thousands of comments of hatred towards any three of them, all three of them, based on fatness, based on money, based on like whatever it is. Holy fuck, that's cruel. What they are going through, right? So like, not only and because they're being brave, like these three people are being brave, like to share it, to be real with it and show the messiness of it or whatever, right? I am more disgusted by how people are treating these three people, and that's just like so hard and unacceptable to like think that people on the internet are spewing so much hatred towards these three people for many different reasons, like the hate of polyamory, the hate of Lindy, the hate of the power dynamics.
It's like they hold a lot of identities that can be hated on, right? Have I been in questionable relationships? Have I made mistakes in my relationships? Of course I have. Have all those relationships been public in the way that everyone can comment on it on YouTube? Of course not. Like, dear God, that's terrifying. You know, like, we're all out here, human beings, just like trying to figure it out. And I think that, you know, from that perspective, these three people have every right to at least try this thing that appears to work okay for them. And, you know, a thought I have had is that to me, to my understanding, this looks less like polyamory and more like polygamy. It feels a little bit more like Roya and Lindy are sister wives than they are in a romantic relationship with each other. One of the reasons I feel that way is the way that she talks about it in the end. And again, there's not enough information here. When you were talking about, like, you know, when you meet your metamor, those people falling in love, a thought I had in that moment too was like, what would that have been like for a Ham? You know, if he's just like, oh, these were two separate relationships and now they're coming together. Like, would he not maybe have had
that's a really
like some complex feelings about that, you know, whatever it is. But the way that Lindy is describing it, and this has been criticized, but she kind of talks about like Roya as the little house mouse is how she refers to her, which feels like, ugh, you know, in this sort of conversation of around like racialized bodies and slavery and monogamy and things like that. Roya, the little house mouse, is paying the bills and doing the dishes and making coffee for everybody in the morning. And Lindy isn't really talking about, like, the way that she's talking about the bed sharing, it sounds like the two women are trading off sleeping with a Ham in the big bed, as opposed to the three of them all sleeping together and, or the two women having their own, like, sexual relationship with each other. I think there is a sense that when there are, it's like threesomes or the women having sex with a Ham, and that the women, like, it's not totally clear, right? Like, it's just, there's not 100% of this, but there's not a huge sense that Roya and Lindy have their own sexual relationship with each other. I think they have love with each other. I think they have, like, a close friendship for sure. And maybe, I mean, obviously there's threesomes, like they're having some sexual contact. And, you know, a lot of this is kind of reading between the lines, but I think that, you know, maybe one of the pieces that felt so disturbing to me about this is kind of like offering this narrative. And again, to the pieces that you're saying, like, I agree with this feeling of like, I want to believe women, right? Like, I don't want to spend this whole time kind of like doubting what Lindy is saying, even while she's doubting what she's saying, like, the whole time. You know, part of the issue is that this isn't about someone's, it is about someone's life, but it's also about someone's brand, right? And the reality that part of her experience is that in at least her internal sense of her brand, she needs to be married to a man in order to prove her value to herself. I don't know that anybody else thinks that. But the way that Shrill ended, the way that she feels she has to stay in this relationship, the way she feels she has to present her relationship to the world, and even the fact that they felt like they had to do a YouTube video explaining what their relationship is or whatever it is, like, this is something they could have kept private. Like, it's nobody's business, really, what they're doing. But because it's part of her brand and part of the story she's selling and the money she's making, it is being offered in that way. And, you know, with this idea of like, what if this is polygamy? Can we have ethical polygamy? I mean, sure, if everyone's consenting to it and knows what it is and so on. Did I just watch the FLDS documentary about the polygamous sex in which, like, children are being abused and so on? Yes, I did. And
yeah, that's different though. It's consenting adults can choose.
For sure. And in that documentary as well, there were many adults who were who were kind of believing what was going on. And this is a whole other complicated thing. But trauma bonding, you know, the experience of being in an abusive relationship, grooming, you know, with the FLDS thing, you know, nothing would have changed if there weren't minors involved. Like, that is where people are stepping in and saying, this is not okay. Does that make it okay when there are adults who are in that situation, who are kind of being brainwashed or whatever it is? Like, I mean, that's a whole other ethical...
Ooh, I mean, that's a whole
other wasp nest or whatever you want to say it. But,
yeah, and I think, like, at the end of the day, we're not going to know for many, many, many years about Lindy's truer experience or, like, whatever, right? Like, we don't actually know, and we might not ever know. Or we might know in a few years what we might get the divorce
memoir in a couple years that will make lots of money.
And then I would be so stoked to see what she actually says about that, and what the parts that she loved and what she didn't, and what, but like, I guess, I'm like, there's power dynamics at play, there's self-esteem issues at play, there were duress decisions at play. So that is going to be complicated and could be an abusive dynamic, right? But at the end of the day, like, I hope for her this has been a learning journey, and she has found more love and support in her life, and I hope at some point, and that's what I was curious, like, oh, are they going to start dating people and figuring out more of their queerness? Like, is it a closed triad? Is it an open triad? That's another thing to discuss in polyamory. And also, like, will Aham, like, get better in his behavior if he starts dating another person in the future besides the two of them, right? So, like, that's my hope, is like that they are now like more clear about what the agreements are between them all, and like that there is wiggle room for the women to explore the relationships they want in their lives as well. That's where it becomes like more ick if that's not the case. Right?
I love your you have such a compassionate and positive, optimistic perspective on all of this.
I do.
And I don't know. I mean, I want to leave space for my own projections and my own baggage and whatever coming in with my judgments around all of this. And, that was, I would say, a worry that I had, a thought that I had, right? Is like, she seems comfortable with this throuple now that it's like, she knows what it is. She knows who the players are. She knows what's happening. She's got her day to day. Like, this feels safe. And my thought is, what happens when he gets another girlfriend, right? And like you say, what are the options and the choices for the women? I mean, I've always gotten the sense, even from what Lindy said, that Aham would be like, of course, like, go and do your thing. But I'm not sure how comfortable Lindy would be if there were cracks in the throuple. And again, have they talked about that, right? Like, is that something where it's like,
and
okay,
do they
this
have
is
a care plan?
like, this is good. This is the three of us, and like, I don't want to use that language of like, this is enough for us, but like, because of what we talked about before, but like, is this, satisfying, or are we okay to stay in this stable structure for a little while, or are we still going to open it up? What does that mean to us? How does it change the way we feel about all these things? Like, there is another book here that I would love to read, which is the exploration of how that throuple came to be. How does Roya feel about all this? Is she comfortable with all this? How did she feel meeting Lindy? Like, I mean, there's so much of Roya's perspective that we don't get. We don't get Aham's side of the story. Like, I'm thinking of almost a fiction book where you're like really inside the heads of each person kind of coming to this. I feel like that would be a really different experience of expressing polyamory, right? Of kind of like, here's an example of polyamory. Because if we're looking at this book as, here's an example of polyamory or ethical non-monogamy that you should use, as a blueprint, where we could be in some danger here, right?
It might be a little hard. Yeah. And that's the thing too, I want to say, like, as like even the past decade, there's way more media, like stories and films and TV shows around polyamory, right? And like, I'm just like, can we have more nice stories too? Like, and that's like with the queer narrative too, right? Like, there's always been just like hard stories for queer people through media. And then like, I think that's why Heated Rivalry went so huge, was like, oh my God, an actual, like, no one dies yet? Yeah. Okay, great. Incredible. We love this. So I think like also with like polyamory, like, it's just new in the media, like in the past decade more so, I would say. And we are trying to like digest these new stories and figure out if like we like them or not. But I think the disappointing part for me reading the book was like, oh, just like another messy story. Like, I want to hear brave stories. I want to hear exciting stories. I want to hear gushy stories. I want, so like in that realm, right? And I think that's like my call to bigger media is like, can we have more nice stories too? Like, instead? And so that was like one of my disappointments or critiques, was that like, it would be nice to have more lush, beautiful, gorgeous stories about polyamory thriving and being wonderful, because it can be in real life if you've done the work. it can be a buoyant, beautiful thing if you're ready and open and wanting to do that for your life, right? So, yeah, that was my disappointment. I was like, oh, another messy story.
Yeah, it does feel like it's offered up for consumption in this way too, where it's easy to judge the story, I guess. Like even in the way that, I don't know, I feel like the messiness is part of what sells it, right? And so I feel like that kind of had to be there. And again, this is this 2010s kind of style of confessional writing that people would consume, right? And is that worth it for her to have that much scrutiny on her private life, for this brand that may not even be true to who she is? I mean, I don't know, right? But like the parts of the book that I really loved were her, experiences on the road and all the thoughts she was having, and like, I think there were a lot of really beautiful like thoughts and insights and so on. In those parts. But yeah, the polyamory side of it, it was just, there wasn't enough information there for us to really understand it from any perspective other than like, oh, that's messy, right? Like, or because even at the end, like as she's kind of explaining, I'm happily sleeping by myself in the guest bed, drowning out the sound of my husband having sex with his girlfriend, or however she phrases it. Because a lot of the phrasing throughout the book is still quite like uncomfortable, I would say, with the polyamorous aspect of it.
Yeah, not everyone has to be comfortable with polyamory, right? And I think that's why this book activated so many people, I guess, is because in general, not a lot of people would be like, oh, like, I don't have a sex drive, and I would actually rather sleep on my own for a little bit and play my games while those people I love are getting their loves and needs met. Like, that's not comfortable and that's not safe for people, but like some people actually really love that dynamic, and that it really works for them, because then they are like, oh, I don't have to like try and convince myself to have more sex with my partner to like make the thing happen, right? So I think like to be enough,
to be the one wife to rule them all, she says.
Yeah, like I'm like very curious about that part, even being like, oh, like did you find a way that you could like be self-sovereign more, or like not attached to that specific outcome all the time by like having multiple bedrooms? And there's like that fluidity around, like, again, a disability justice standpoint of like not everyone has capacity for that all the time, and like how are we caring for ourselves, and who, like, I don't know, I'd be very curious how they decide who's where every night and the dynamic of that, because I think that's where, like, I'm very curious. I'm like, ooh, that's what I would love to know.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's so much untold in this story, and there is that feeling like, from a writing perspective, the first 90% of the book, I would say, there's a lot of language that she may be kind of speaking to, like, here's how I thought about it, and now my thoughts have changed. But she says so many times things like, I'm his wife, like, that's his girlfriend, she's this tiny other woman. Like, she uses a lot of that kind of language that I feel like, from a place where, when and if she does become comfortable with polyamory, there would be a different way of languaging, like, that's my partner's love. Like, that's a very different way of phrasing, like the phrasing that you just used, from like his girlfriend, or like that other woman, that secret girlfriend. Like, she says a lot of stuff like that. So again, I don't know if she necessarily meant that as like speaking from where she was at the time, whereas now it would be different, but you don't feel a real tone shift, towards the end. So
it's too fast, and it's too fast, and it's too much in a beautiful bow. Like, that's my skeptical part of me, is that it was too quick and it's too much of a pretty bow.
It's too branded. Yeah, which I think she names that a few times, right? Is like that she talks about how she tied Trill up in a little bow, and that wasn't entirely true. And so you're already set up to see her as an unreliable narrator, right?
And just another lens, like some of the favorite pieces I had in the book was when her voice notes were kind of talking about like more of her values and humanness, and and the states' political parties, but just like her badass values that she has, and that she's working on decolonizing this thing or working on this, and like I think that is one of my favorite parts that I had in the book. And then secondly, how that relates to this comment of like, yeah, like monogamy is a certain structure that was like, is now pervasive and has to be the thing, right? And I think it, like from what I've known about like the lineage of polyamorous folks that are of the majority of the world, you know, people of color and such, that like, yeah, monogamy flattens their experience and their life and their culture and all of these things. So like, yeah, I've dated people that are from all over the world, and like there are different beliefs and cultures that deal with non-monogamy in much more beautiful, interesting ways than we do. So I think, yeah, just like that layer of like, you know, we are in a colony. Yeah. We live in a colony, and you know, I think there's been many, many harms done to the people of this land on Turtle Island, and it wasn't always the way of relating, right? So I think there's like, yeah, I just wanted to note that, like, that it's maybe shocking and striking for some folks, you know, this idea of polyamory or non-monogamy, but yeah, if you go outside of our white supremacist colony, there are many ways of love and relating and relationships and community that, you know, we don't have structure for. And that,
I think one other piece too that I'll share is, you know, Lindy is maybe a lot more relatable than she thinks, right? Like, you know, even the self-hatred in her head, whatever it is, like, so much of it is so relatable. And, you know, one thing that I do find relatable about her too is like, I'm also a white woman that is trying my best, you know, and like, I'm not always getting it right. And I think that so much 100%. Of the time,
she has humility.
Yes, for sure. She has humility, which again, you know, makes her maybe more vulnerable to some people criticizing her. But, you know, the good girl tattoo part I thought was so interesting. I loved the way that she described getting a tattoo. I feel so similarly about it, like claiming my body, you know, sort of saying like, this is mine, you know, all of that. And I thought that the choice of good girl was just really interesting, like really something to kind of pull apart a little bit, because she's good. She's so good. You know, she's one of these people that's so good. You know, she's got an innocence to her, right? Where she's just like innocently offering these things to the world, and people are really coming down on her, and she's taken a lot of abuse for that, you know? And this idea of good girl as naming who she is, but also that being such a codependent phrasing, you know, like that being such a, you know, to be a good girl, you know, she talks about it from the sexual perspective, but also good girl is something a lot of women in our generation are trying to deprogram from because of that trade, you know, authenticity for connection, like always trying to be good. And so I feel like there's a lot of layers to that particular choice. And then later she reads it backwards as like blah, blah, or something like that. Like she has this, there's like this inversion of the tattoo that she sees sometimes, and she's like, maybe I'm really a blah, blah, or I forget what word she uses for it. But there's a lot going on there.
But I would love to talk to her about her good girl tattoo more. Yeah. And, you know, seeing that as like her first body mod, like the septum and the good girl tattoo, to now where she has more tattoos, you know, and all of that. So like, yeah, there's a beautiful, obviously, journey there that we don't know about as well, which I'm like, ooh, I wonder how that evolved for her. And tattoos are stories. And anyways.
And yeah, I appreciate Lindy for being good, being as good as she can be. And I just have a lot of compassion for her in, you know, not always getting it right or making 100%. Mistakes or whatever it is. I mean, if I were as famous as Lindy West was, listen, I've written a lot of things that could be highly criticized, but nobody cares because I'm not that famous, right? So like, we all have those vulnerabilities, and I feel like I could see something like that happening to me, but you know, I'm not as much in the public eye or whatever it is. Like, she has a lot to be proud of, I think. And, you know, again, I sort of am left with this feeling of like, Lindy, you are so lovable, you know, you're so lovable, like so beautiful, so sexy too. Like, she's a very sexy, beautiful woman. And if she wanted to have a different experience in her relationship, that is a choice that she could make, you know, for sure. Yeah.
100%. Yeah. And if she ever gets to that place, I hope she just fucking goes for it. Like, you know, she Yeah, but I also am like, if she is choosing this, I hope it is the
Yeah,
best for
absolutely.
her too. Right?
And our
Like,
relationships also, you know, they don't solve our deep self-hatred or our depression or ADHD or whatever it is. Like, relationships can express some things about who we are. They can change us. You know, they're a part of the web of everything that we are within. And also, they're not everything, right? So, like, whether she's with a Hum or Roya or nobody or whatever it is, like, she's still gonna be Lindy, right? Yeah.
yeah.
I really appreciate you being here, Tanille. It's been so great to see you and hear your
my
perspective
pleasure.
and everything. Where can people find you? What do you want to leave folks with?
Oh, yeah, my website, you can check me out. I work with clients worldwide. If you're a couple or part of a partnership, I would love to chat with you. TanilleGeib.ca. And then, look out for Slow Burn, probably just across Canada in 2027.
And I'll link all that in the show notes as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds
Okay.
great.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
So much. Take care. Bye.